Hi there, welcome once again. I'm Imran Garta and you're in the stream. Today, many in Malawi accuse their president of corruption and chaos. So why have anti-government protests been scaled back? Our digital producer, Ahmed Shihabuddin, is here as always, looking out for your live feedback as and when it comes through. Also on the couch is Catherine Ma. Catherine's a technology consultant who works on information and communications technology related to accountability and governance. A lot of titles in there. It's a mouthful, Catherine. Good to have you on the orange couch. Tell us a little bit about what you're following at this moment in time and some of the stuff you're working on.
Sure. So I'm really looking at service delivery and good governance issues in particularly the Middle East and the aftermath of the North African revolutions.
Busy few months for you.
It has been.
Yeah. What's been the biggest challenge?
Trying to understand where all these institutions are falling out in the aftermath. I think that there's a lot of, not a lot of clarity there. So.
Yeah, a lot of people seem to have these ready-made, prepackaged answers about the future. But I think some of the beauty of this is that we don't really know where this is going to go.
Organic and emerging.
Yeah. Well, one of the places that's organic and emerging is definitely Malawi. We're going to get to that in a moment or two. Well, let us know what stories matter to you. Follow us on Twitter and send us a tweet with the hashtag AJStream. We could feature your suggestion in a future episode.
Hi, I'm Jimmy Wales, founder of Wikipedia, and I'm in the stream.
Now, before we get to Malawi, let's head to New York, where the stream's very own Derek Ashong is attending the Social Good Summit. Derek, what's going on?
Hey, Imran, thanks for that. As Imran just told you, we are here in New York City live at the Social Good Summit. It's being sponsored actually by 92Y, Mashable, and the UN Foundation. I'm very happy to have joining me today Brandon Littman of One Day on Earth. Brandon, thanks so much for being with us. Tell us what One Day on Earth is all about.
One Day on Earth is an online community that came together and filmed in every country in the world on one day in 2010. And it's a growing community of people that want to share what matters most to them on a global platform. And we're doing it every year. At the center of the project is a documentary film, but the true equity of the project is the community that's sticking together and exploring what daily life on our planet really is.
Now talk to us a little bit about that community. How did you build it and who's a member?
We have over 17,500 media creators in our community that collaborated together on a single day.
And these are people worldwide?
These are people worldwide, every single country in the world. We partnered up with over 60 nonprofits, UNDP, United Nations agencies across the board, and we leveraged our partnerships to make sure that we're telling a truly global story by getting literally everywhere in the world.
Now, when you say that it's a truly global story, what kind of stories have you seen coming from people?
Oh, the diversity is incredible. I mean, everything from childbirth to military parades to really thoughtful stories of people's personal experiences as they deal with joys and struggles throughout the day.
And I understand that you guys have some really distinctive footage from Libya. Talk to us a little bit about your relationship with the Libyan revolution.
Well, that was an interesting byproduct of this project. And, as I mentioned, the true equity of this project is in its community. So when the Arab Spring, came to be, we reached out to our community throughout the Arab world and let them know that we were listening and we were there. So when the revolution started in Libya, we had over 40 people in Libya that were media creators that were trying to communicate with the outside. They were media literate, they had technology, and we were able to be one of the sole production sources in the beginning of the revolution out of Tripoli.
So tell me a little of your thoughts about what all this means for the creation of media moving forward. I know you're planning to put this all together into a film, but what happens when you give the power to tell stories in the hands of people who are not necessarily professionals? What are the benefits and the pitfalls?
Well, I think our community is a little bit unique because we have both professionals and non-professionals, and they're inspiring each other. And so by creating that kind of community, you're able to navigate around topics that are sometimes very difficult to get a really candid and intimate look on. I think that this is the evolution of media creation. And this is, it's community-based media creation where we're working together to tell a story. And I'm excited on the results and the power of it.
And tell us why you came here for this Social Good Summit.
Well, we have a very close relationship with the United Nations, and they've been so supportive. And we have been talking to the UN Foundation quite a bit just about, how to partner with some of the great agencies that work with the United Nations Foundation. So it seems like a natural fit. I mean, Mashable Summit is made up of some of the most brilliant content creators and communicators around the world.
Sure.
So, I mean, the audience is prime audience to help communicate this global story that we're trying to communicate.
I love that. I was on a panel yesterday with Randy Zuckerberg and with Mandy Moore talking about how do we combat malaria, and it went brilliantly. I've met so many wonderful people here. One of the things I love is the interactivity. Our audience is very interactive. Tell us how people who are watching this now can get involved with One Day on Earth.
Well, we're doing this every year as a community. And one of the most important things about this is that we do share the media together. And the way you get to download the media from the archive is by participating. You open up. This is a global platform. We have some amazing partners that are listening. So on 11/11/11, coming up in about 50 days or so, we will do it together again as a community. And last year we created 3,000 hours of footage. This year, I feel like that'll pale in comparison.
Amen. Thank you so much, Brandon. You heard it here first at 11/11/11. You can make your voice heard from your part of the world about this broader project of One Day on Earth. Tell us your story on One Day on Earth. Send them something. Definitely tweet us at AJ Stream so we can keep tabs on what kind of stuff you're creating. It's great to be here at the Social Good Summit. Back to you, Imran.
Thanks for that, Derek. Fascinating insight there. Catherine, I suppose for those who doubt whether globalization actually exists one day on Earth, definitely debunks that. One of the interesting things for me that Brandon said was you get different people and their different narratives from all over the world. That has been done. But he said this gives you an intimate view into their lives. And then you bring all of this together. Do you feel that all these tools that we have are starting to get a deeper, more intimate view of people as they contribute to this melting pot?
No, absolutely. I think that what social media allows us to do, and things like YouTube videos, and clearly Brandon's project allows us to each tell our own narrative and broadcast that out. The question is, of course, what are the channels that we're using and how do people access and find that? And so that will be the more interesting question for me, is how do we navigate? I was wondering, as Brandon talked, how do they edit? How do they choose what stories they are?
I mean, it could be ideologically based, right?
It could. I'm not accusing him of that.
Yeah,
but
but it
sure,
could
of
be.
course.
No, yeah, and that's the danger, because no matter what, somebody has to make a decision as to how to put all of this together.
Exactly, all that raw footage.
Yeah, it doesn't have a mind of its own, does it?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's, before we move on to Malawi, Ahmed, give us a taste of what our community is saying regarding some of the other stories as well.
All right, well, one of the biggest stories in the U.S. right now is the scheduled execution, rather, of a 42-year-old man, Troy Davis, in the southern state of Georgia on Wednesday night. The African-American was sentenced to death for the murder of an off-duty police officer in 1989. Though he was found guilty, there was no physical evidence linking him to the crime, and most witnesses who originally gave evidence against him have since changed their testimony. Now, using the hashtag Troy Davis, netizens have posted photos and videos of rallies in support of Davis, and a quick look at Trends Map right here shows you that there's an ongoing and growing global conversation around the hashtag. Now, petitions are also circulating online, as well as contacts for even the Attorney General of the U.S., Eric Holder. From this tweet right here, we can see Mr. David writes, "I hope everyone on my timeline who has an audience, especially artists, send out Eric Holder's phone number and ask him to stop Troy Davis's execution. Even the European Union has called for his execution to be commuted. And when concerns emerged online that Troy Davis was being prevented from becoming a trending topic on Twitter, whether or not that was the case or not, Big Boy, a famous hip-hop artist in the US, wrote this. He said, "We don't need a trending topic, we need boots on the ground. Meet me in Jackson, Georgia, 40 miles outside of Atlanta." And he went on to actually offer the address of the prison where he's being held. But it's not just hip-hop stars that are hoping to stop the execution. Goldie Taylor wrote right here on Twitter, "George W. Bush, Jimmy Carter, a former FBI director, and 27 prosecutors all say the Troy Davis execution should be stopped." So with just hours, I think 3 hours to go before the planned execution, tweets emerged highlighting the racial inequality that seemed to be dominating the online discussions. Here's one of those from Goddess Crew. It says, "I'm not making it racial. It became racial when Troy Davis was born black. Justice is constantly being carried selectively in this country." Now, that was just one of the many stories that you are sharing with us. So here are a couple that we are following ourselves on Twitter.
Our next story was requested by you, our viewers, and it's about Malawi, a country of nearly 16 million people in southern Africa that is experiencing its very own version of the Arab Spring, well, of sorts. Civil society organizations have asked Malawians to stay away from work for 3 days to protest against the president, Bingu wa Mutharika. He's accused of corruption and ineffective governance. Now, activists initially called for nationwide demonstrations but postponed those plans at the very last moments. Well, Malawian media is reporting that those rallies were actually called off because they couldn't get guarantees of protection from the police. These are pictures from July and events that were infamous for many Malawians. They'll remember it in infamy: protests, riots, looting, and a crackdown that many deemed brutal. In that first round of demonstrations, at least 19 were killed in 2 days of protests. Now, those protests were against chronic fuel and foreign currency shortages. Now, although Mutharika fired his entire cabinet after the July protests, he appointed his wife and his brother to a new cabinet, causing more outrage. Protesters also want the president to account for his personal wealth. And let me just show you who we're talking about here. Bingu wa Mutharika. There he is, the president in his 70s, democratically elected twice, but definitely some concern over the way he's running the country now. Well, joining us now via Skype is Rafiq. He's a prominent Malawian civil rights activist. He's the director of the Malawi-based Institute for Policy Interaction. It's a non-profit organization that encourages public debate on government policy and decision-making. Rafiq, welcome to the program. To what extent, Rafiq, did those events in July scar the nation?
Well, it actually left an indelible mark in the minds and consciousness of the people. Whilst one may not compare it with the Arab Spring, I think it was an awakening of sorts, whereby ordinary people suddenly realized that we do have the power, that the social contract emanates from us, and we can shake the pillars of authority, especially when that authority does not respond to our needs, our realities, and our aspirations. So it was an awakening of sorts. However, since then we have floundered into one morass after another.
You have called for a 3-day stay away from work. You were given the backing of a court to hold a vigil. Why did you not go that route? How ominous could the possible threat have been from the police for you to stay off the streets?
Well, firstly, we vacated one injunction that prevented us from demonstrating. However, late last night, another injunction was granted to the Indigenous Businessmen's Association of Malawi, preventing us from demonstrating. And even had we decided to go ahead, we do need to have 48 hours prior to the event to inform and notify the police, the authorities, that we will be using such and such a venue. And that was not going to be possible. So basically, the lateness of the hour, and some would say a cynical manipulation of the rules, prevented us from proceeding from the vigil, especially since we uphold the rule of law, no matter how selectively it is applied. And of course, the plan B was then to hold a stay away, which means the police with their live ammunition and their dum-dum bullets cannot shoot you when you sit in your house and hold a vigil. So on that premise, the civil society went ahead with this appeal, and by and large, it appears to have been fairly successful.
Okay.
The atmosphere is quiet, but we've been effective, I think.
Okay, let's bring Catherine in.
Sure, I was just curious, Rafiq, how did you manage to get the message out at such short notice? You said it was a last-minute decision to switch to the stay away.
We have no access to the public media. It's strictly state controlled, and it's almost controlled by the party in government. That has been the way it's always been. But we do have a very vibrant, thriving private media that picks up, especially a radio station by the name of Zodiac that has got nearly nationwide coverage, and we launched appeals through all the private media that basically we went to the people of Malawi and said these are the impediments that confront us, and if you feel so strongly about the concerns that have been raised, then you need to actually show your
Sure.
concern by your
So
actions.
I'm curious, we made reference to the Arab Spring earlier. Has social media played a significant role in this at all?
No, because only 6% of the population of Malawi have access to electricity. And I would say less than 2% have access to computers. So social media is not as prevalent as it may be elsewhere.
Rafiq, we have on Twitter Ms. Lady Jackie saying governments threaten to deregister NGOs participating in anti-government action. And then even though not many people might have access to social media, one person who does, Wizaj, who is in Blantyre, I believe in Malawi, said, has anybody ever achieved change by staying at home? CSO leaders have been palm-oiled. We need new, bold heroes. To what extent do you think the government's trying to perhaps scare NGOs or civil society organizations from participating, will that affect the spirit of challenging the government by individuals or groups?
Okay, the government has come down with a very, very heavy hand. There was a threat to deregister all NGOs, and then Section 106 of the Penal Code, which was amended in 2010, has been invoked by the police to say that they cannot guarantee security, and as such, any damages that occur during demonstrations will be to the account of the conveners and organizers. On top of that, this has been augmented by a terror campaign. My own office was petrol bombed and gutted on the 1st of September. And indeed, one of my colleagues in the eastern region was beaten up by 15 DPP cadets as he was having lunch today.
Rafiq, the government's narrative is interesting regarding this because they say this doesn't have too much to do with the fact, while recognizing that there are economic problems, fuel shortages, foreign currency issues, they claim this has nothing to do with those legitimate problems. Government spokesperson Patricia Cagliati has said that this is an attempt from northerners and tribes from the north to seize power, painting it along completely sectarian and ethnic lines. What do you make of that?
Patricia and government spokesperson Hedwig Ntaba are adept at pressing the right buttons. They know the visceral points to apply. So once you invoke the northerner card or the racist card, people tend to shy away from it because we tend not to like to confront such issues. The real problem is that government refuses to curb its own expenditure whilst imposing punitive taxes on the poor. The price of bread has gone up by 70% overnight, and the things we are asking for is academic freedom. Our university has been closed for 7 months because 4 lecturers will not be reinstated by the head of state. So really the problems, there are many issues that could be addressed simply by the head of state, picking up the phone and saying, do this, do this, do this, and basically we would be ready to talk. But there seems to be a total refusal to deal with the issues and instead find scapegoats.
Rafiq, on Facebook we have Edith Amin. I'm just going to read to you a bit of what she wrote. She said, it's high time we stop depending on CSO leaders. We have to fight for our rights as we are the people suffering under this dictator, Bingu. So it seems, at least she is losing faith in, NGOs or civil society organizations. And then at the bottom, something, to share with you and see if you could clarify for us. It says, we live in fear. We don't know when we will have our property torched by zealous DPP cadets. Malawi is no longer a warm heart. Property torched, is that ongoing? What is that about there? What's she referring to?
Yeah, I wouldn't blame the public for losing confidence in civil society. They've been disappointed twice, and they do not understand the impediments that confront us in trying to convey a free expression and peaceful demonstration. We're frustrated and thwarted by the authorities. As for the property being torched, in fact, it's become a commonplace. I told you, my office was petrol bombed and it was gutted. Recently, activist Sembereka, as well as Salim Bagas, as well as the Blantyre market, were torched as recently as 2 nights ago. So it's actually become a terror tactic.
Rafiq, it's not been the case that the so-called international community has completely ignored Malawi. There have been steps taken by big powers, the EU and others, Britain and the United States in particular. Britain cancelling $40 million in aid to Malawi, the United States suspending a $250 million grant. But given the poverty, given the desperation, given the massive shortages in your country, is this really the right thing for these big powers to do? By starving the people of Malawi, or contributing to the starving of the people of Malawi, and possibly preserving and strengthening Mutharika's grip by these measures?
Well, for your information, the British suspended aid after Mutharika expelled the British envoy, His Excellency Cochrane Diet, simply because the envoy sent a missive to Whitehall deploring the autocratic nature of Mutharika's rule. And the relationships with the donor community have soured because of the president's autocratic style. So, and in reaction to that, instead of changing his ways and perhaps weaning Malawi away from donor dependency in gradual phases that doesn't hurt the poor, we produced a zero deficit budget, which actually imposes draconian taxes on the poor whilst not curbing government expenditure. So really the misery of untrammeled poverty has increased in Malawi.
Okay, Rafiq, stay where you are, because we'll continue this discussion online, stream.aljazeera.com, in our post show. It's been a great pleasure talking to you. We'll have another 5 to 10 minutes or so online as we flesh out some of these issues. Catherine, great pleasure having you on the stream. Hope to have you on the orange couch again some point soon. And Ahmed, you stay where you are as well. Don't forget stream.aljazeera.com for the post show. Now, tomorrow we look at ongoing protests in Bahrain as the country prepares for an election this weekend. Now you can promo the, don't forget you can join us for Bahrain. You can join us on Facebook, like us on the Facebook site, and of course AJ Stream on Twitter is where you can visit us. So stream.aljazeera.com for the post show as we discuss Malawi with Rafiq, who's still standing by. We'll see you soon. Welcome to the post show. Stream.aljazeera.com is where you're watching us. We're talking Malawi. Rafiq is still standing by via Skype. There he is. Good to hear the connection is okay. Rafiq, I suppose it is an indictment
Right,
of...
Ron. Thank you.
Hi, Rafiq. Can you hear me? Oh, there he is. He's gone.
Yeah.
Oh,
Hi.
we can hear you. We can't see you for the moment. We've just got a photograph of you. We'll re-establish the connection there with Rafiq. Let's go to Catherine for a moment. Catherine, thoughts, reflections on the past 10 minutes or so?
It's a fascinating conversation, even just listening to some of the budgetary issues that Rafiq was mentioning. We've obviously here in the United States been having quite a conversation about that, the budget and the impact that balancing a budget would have on citizens. And it's heartbreaking to hear Rafiq sort of express these tensions, one of which is this really strong anti-corruption agenda on the part of donor agencies and the like. And there's obviously great value in that, whereas the actual impact on Malawians themselves and access to basic services and needs, it's a terrible, terrible balance. I don't know how.
When
I don't know
he
how you
said only
resolve that.
6% of people actually have access to electricity,
Right.
that was all he needed to say, wasn't it?
Right, or you can look at the fact that Malawi has a really high HIV and AIDS prevalence rate, or the number of people living under $2 a day. It's also astronomical. So.
Yep, Ahmed?
If I may just jump in here, because on Facebook we've had a lot of people commenting about this idea that you can't challenge the government or even discuss politics in public in Malawi. Maggie Carter saying, a demo in Malawi, wow, I was in Malawi in 1985 and people would only whisper about politics since there were so many paid or spies on neighbors and families, at least Maggie's alleging. And then on Twitter, this just came in, and I'd love to get Rafiq's thoughts. True Value Metric saying, I worked in Malawi in the late 1980s when Benda was president, and analysis of labor conditions in agriculture was banned. So, Rafiq, if you can hear us.
He's back.
Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, great. How does that add up in terms of now? I mean, is there a long history of banning, let's say, criticisms of conditions or labor conditions or government in general? Or is this something...
I was a pro-democracy activist in 92, 93, and in fact we ushered in multi-party democracy in 94. And one of the pivotal elements or cardinal elements is freedom of expression. Prior to that, you had no discussion whatsoever of anything political, anything that could even be deemed remotely critical of the regime in place. Now, most of our leaders today have grown up during that era, Bingu himself included. And I think they do not know any other way to behave.
But Rafiq, aren't you being a little bit unfair now? Because I mean, he was democratically elected twice. He was seen as a technocrat, an economist. He worked at the World Bank. He was seen as somebody who was a safe pair of hands, particularly with the economic nous to get Malawi on its own feet and to build up the infrastructure while keeping a democracy. Isn't it a bit unfair to say this is something intrinsic to his character?
Okay, have you read the report on his performance when he was Secretary General of COMESA?
No.
If you did look at that report, you would see exactly the kind of behavior we're seeing now. Further to that, you say he was democratically elected twice. Well, he was democratically elected once. The first time he was ushered into power by the incumbent who thought he would use him as a puppet, but was soon disturbed when Bingu dumped the party that fostered him into power and went ahead and formed his own party, which had no standing in parliament. He then poached over 70 seats in parliament in utter violation of the constitution. He's held no local government elections since being elected into power for the last 8 years. So really, his democratic credentials, I think, are highly suspect.
Rafiq.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, Rafiq, I'm curious, what's the state of the opposition at this point in time? Even if he were not president, would there be a viable alternative candidate?
No, the opposition has been decimated. You see, in Malawi, you'll find it difficult to understand. We have a constitution that outlines a very presidential system of government. However, because of the linkage with the UK, we've also adopted elements of a parliamentary system. So we've got a hybrid system. We've got an elected president elected by the public, but he can also appoint ministers from Parliament, which means he has got a leg in the legislature as well as the executive. And he uses this to, all presidents have used this as a measure of patronage and to extend the neo-patrimonialistic syndrome that is a hallmark of African politics. So basically, what it boils down to is that the position of the president seems to create a sort of arrogant, non-accountable nature that we challenge as civil
Right.
society. And I will read to you the fundamental principles of our constitution. It's a very brief one. It says, this is section 12, and it says, this constitution is founded upon the following underlying principles. All legal and political authority of the state derives from the people of Malawi and shall be exercised in accordance with this constitution solely to serve and protect their interests. And then it goes on to say the authority to exercise power of state is conditional upon the sustained trust of the people of Malawi. And that trust can only be maintained through open, accountable, and transparent government and informed democratic choice. Need I say any more?
Rafiq, talking about the opposition, there was an emotional and personality falling out as well between the president and Joyce Banda, the former vice president. How much does that element come into play here? How much support does she actually have?
Actually, there wasn't a falling out because she didn't really do anything wrong. And she's not the former vice president because the only way she can be removed is to be impeached because she was elected on the same ticket as the president. So as far as constitution
Okay,
goes,
let me say frozen out vice president. How's that?
thank you.
Okay.
Now that sums it up very graphically. Mutharika has had this problem with his vice presidents ever since he became president. The previous one, Kasim Chilumpa, he accused of treason, of plotting to assassinate him. And that case never came to court, but it effectively neutralized Chilumpa. Now he's doing the same thing to Joyce. The reason being that he wants to bring in his own brother as president to follow in his footsteps. So it becomes a dynasty. And Joyce is an obstacle in his path.
Rafiq, we have Ms. Lady Jackie tweeting in again saying there's a feeling that the youth should play more of an active role. Organizers are, I think, referring again to the civil society organizers as being outdated. And just to piggyback off that, the other Rizman is asking you directly, do you have any suggestions for how people in the West can best help Malawi? We spoke about Western governments and their role. What about individuals?
Okay, firstly, I would say to you that the youth are disgruntled. They feel disenfranchised, and I don't blame them for it. I actually was a primary organizer of the July 20 demonstration, and that was a huge success. But since then, since my offices were burnt, I've taken a back seat, and I was basically not involved in the organizing of the latest vigil. So I was very much in the dark. And I don't blame I don't blame the public at all, but then I don't blame civil society either. It's not easy when you're being asked to risk everything you have and your family included for a common cause, and then you find that the government keeps on putting obstacles in your way. The public don't understand what you're trying to do, and they suspect you've been paid off. So it is a catch-22 situation, but I agree the youth need to play a more aggressive role, and I would welcome it. As for what individuals can do abroad, I would say that the individuals can influence their governments. They need to speak to their members of parliament so that basically the aid that comes to Malawi, when it is suspended, as you rightly said, the poorest are hurt the hardest when there's suspension of aid. So instead of using the old methodology of channeling all aid through government, you could start channeling that aid directly through NGOs so that it reaches the people directly to whom it's targeted for. This will also reduce corruption and it will ease the suffering on the ground. Plus, it also obviates the bad name that donors often get because this is used mercilessly by the spin doctors. You see,
Right.
the British don't care for you. They suspend aid and you're suffering.
Yeah, Rafiq, it's been a wonderful pleasure having you on the stream. Thank you very much for joining us and having a very in-depth discussion with us over the situation in Malawi. We hope to speak to you soon, perhaps when the country is in better circumstances.
I look forward to that.
Rafiq Hajat joining us there via Skype from Malawi. We don't have too much time left on the post show, Catherine, so I'm going to ask you for some thoughts to wrap us up.
I actually was in Malawi about 4 or 5 years ago, and it's amazing to see what a huge difference this is. When I visited Blantyre and the long way, it was a very sleepy place, and so clearly circumstances must be pretty dire that people are out on the streets like in the way that they are. So I mean, my thoughts are certainly with them.
Ahmed, looking forward to tomorrow. We're already starting to get some feedback regarding Bahrain.
Yeah, Bahrain's always a very spiritful discussion on our online communities. We get maybe dozens of videos a day from Bahrain, from both sides of the political discussion.
Well, looking forward to it. Derek will be in the hot seat. Ahmed will be there on the orange couch. We hope you join us then. And of course, you can watch it on TV or here, stream.aljazeera.com. See you soon.